The fluorescent lights of JFK Terminal 4 cast harsh shadows across the boarding gate at 9:47 p.m. Keisha Morgan stood 3 people back from the priority lane, her gray hoodie pulled low over tired eyes, the worn duffel bag on her shoulder sagging with the weight of something heavier than clothes. "Ma'am." The gate agent's voice carried that particular tone, polite but final. "Economy boarding starts in 10 minutes. Priority passengers only right now." Keisha nodded, stepped back without a word. The man behind her, Grant Whitmore, didn't bother hiding his smirk as he moved past in a cloud of cologne that cost more than her entire outfit. His voice carried deliberately loud to his companion. "Some people really think they belong everywhere, don't they, Tyler?" Tyler Beaumont adjusted his Rolex phone, already out camera angling subtly toward Keisha. The message to their group chat was immediate. "Look at this flying to Seattle, dressed like she's going to Goodwill." Ashley Cunningham, third in their trio, giggled from the priority lane, her phone capturing content for an audience that would never see the woman's face, only the judgment. Keisha's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out with hands that didn't shake, not yet. The message from Seattle Grace Medical Center made her jaw tighten. "Your mother's vitals declining. Oxygen at 82%. Please arrive soon." She closed her eyes. 4 counts in, 7 hold, 8 out. The intercom crackled. "First class and priority passengers welcome aboard." Grant breezed past her again, champagne already waiting in his mind. The gate agent scanned his boarding pass with a smile that never quite reached Keisha, standing silent and separate in the fluorescent wash. Her duffel bag shifted as she adjusted the strap. For just a moment, metal glinted a dog tag chain visible at her collar before disappearing back under the hoodie's fabric. Nobody noticed. Nobody ever did. The jet bridge smelled like recycled air and someone's expensive perfume. Keisha walked it slowly, letting the first-class passengers rush ahead, their urgency to claim overhead space somehow fitting their entire worldview into cramped aluminum bins. Grant was already settling into 2A, the champagne flute catching light as a flight attendant poured with practiced precision. Ashley had her phone out, the live stream already running. "Flying first-class vibe, you guys. Seattle, here we come." Keisha passed them without looking up. The cabin narrowed past row 10, the seats shrinking, the legroom evaporating into the reality of economy travel. 32C, window seat, overwing exit. She slid in, checked the exit door mechanism with a glance that lasted 2 seconds but cataloged everything. Handle position, door seal integrity. The emergency instructions placard worn but readable. Her fingers found the seatbelt, pulled it across her lap, adjusted the tension to exactly the pressure she'd learned years ago in training that had nothing to do with commercial aviation. The buckle clicked. Tyler Walsh walked past, heading toward economy, plus saw her hands on the belt, the specific way her thumbs pressed against the webbing to test load distribution. Weird tension habit, he thought, filing it away for later mockery. Claire Bennett, senior flight attendant, came by with water. "Can I get you anything else, ma'am?" "I'm fine, thank you." Claire's eyes lingered half a second longer than necessary. Something about this passenger's posture didn't match the worn hoodie and faded jeans. She'd seen it before, military bearing, trying to hide itself in civilian clothes. Keisha pulled out her laptop, the machine old enough that its fan wheezed on startup. The weather app opened to a screen that would have looked normal to anyone who didn't know better, but the interface had layers civilian apps didn't carry. Satellite feeds, military weather overlays, real-time ash dispersal modeling from the Aleutian volcanic arc. The elderly woman in 32B leaned slightly, trying to be polite but curious. Keisha's hand moved quickly, minimizing the screen. Her left hand trembled just slightly as she reached for the water Claire had left. She gripped the cup tighter, willing the tremor to stop. It didn't. The woman beside her noticed her voice soft with concern. "Are you nervous about flying, dear?" Keisha took a sip, used the moment to steady herself. just tired. The tremor wasn't from fear. It never had been. The ejection seat malfunction 8 years ago had left her with permanent nerve damage barely noticeable most days, except when stress or exhaustion pushed her body past its limits. Right now, with her mother dying 3,000 miles away and every second feeling like sand through broken glass, her body was past every limit it had. She closed the laptop, pulled the hoodie tighter, and closed her eyes. 4 counts in, 7 hold, 8 out. The engines began to spool up for taxi. Captain Thomas Rivers' voice filled the cabin with practiced warmth. "Good evening, folks. This is your captain speaking. Flight time to Seattle tonight is 5 hours and 20 minutes. We're expecting smooth conditions, light winds, and an on-time arrival. Sit back, relax, and we'll have you on the ground before you know it." Grant Whitmore flagged down a flight attendant before the captain finished speaking. "Excuse me, this pillow is unacceptable. For what I paid for this seat, I expect a better quality." The young flight attendant, barely 25 and already exhausted, nodded with a smile that cost her something. "I'll see what I can find, sir." "You do that." 3 rows back in economy, Keisha's eyes remained closed, but her breathing had fallen into a rhythm that would have looked like sleep to anyone who didn't know better. 4 counts in, 7 hold, 8 out. The pattern Navy pilots used to stay conscious under high G loads, modified by Air Force fighter training to maintain blood oxygen during rapid altitude changes. Her fingers tapped the armrest in sequences that matched nothing conscious calculating runway distances, fuel burn rates, crosswind components for Seattle-Tacoma's standard approach vectors. Mrs. Delilah Ross, the elderly woman in 32B, watched the fingers with grandmother's curiosity. "You count things a lot, dear. Is it OCD? My grandson has that very smart boy." Keisha opened her eyes, offered a small smile. "Something like that." The Boeing 777 began its taxi, the massive turbofans winding up with that distinctive whine that made nervous flyers grip armrests and experienced travelers barely notice. Keisha noticed everything. The slight yaw to the left as the captain corrected for crosswind. The 2-second delay between throttle up and forward momentum standard for this aircraft's weight class. The way the fuselage flex patterns indicated a plane loaded heavier in the aft cargo hold than forward. Tyler Beaumont walked past her row, returning from the first-class lavatory, stopped when he saw her phone screen. The weather app was open again, displaying layers of information that didn't match anything he'd seen on consumer applications. "Hey." His tone carried that particular Silicon Valley smugness. "Is that a pilot app? You a flight attendant or something?" Keisha's thumb moved quickly, darkening the screen. "Just interested in weather." "Right." Tyler's laugh was sharp, designed to be heard. "And I'm a brain surgeon. Top Gun obsession much." He walked back toward first class, already composing the story in his head. Grant caught it immediately when Tyler returned. "What's the deal?" "That woman back in 32C, she's got pilot apps on her phone, acting like she knows something." Grant's voice carried deliberately through the first-class cabin, loud enough that economy passengers could hear every word. "People watch Top Gun once and think they're aviators. It's honestly embarrassing." Ashley Cunningham's livestream caught his comment, her followers already reacting with laughing emojis. In 32C, Keisha's heartbeat held steady at 58 beats per minute, abnormally low. For someone supposedly listening to public humiliation, perfectly normal for someone trained to maintain physiological calm under hostile fire. Mrs. Ross squeezed her armrest as the engines reached full power for takeoff, the acceleration pressing everyone back into their seats. Keisha's hands remained perfectly still. The contrast was everything. 20 minutes into the flight, the seatbelt sign chimed off. Passengers stirred, reached for overhead bins, queued for lavatories. Keisha pulled out a small spiral notebook, the kind that cost $2 at drugstores. Her pen moved across the page in quick strokes that looked like abstract doodles. Curved lines, angle notations, vector arrows that meant nothing to civilian eyes. Mrs. Ross glanced over with polite interest. Pretty drawings, dear. Do you do art? Just thinking on paper. The older woman smiled, returned to her magazine. What Mrs. Ross couldn't know was that she was looking at approach vectors for Anchorage International calculated for crosswind landing with partial hydraulic failure, annotated with fuel endurance limits and single-engine glide ratios. Keisha's hoodie pocket was unzipped, careless, or perhaps exhaustion finally breaking through discipline. When she shifted to reach for her water, something metallic slid out, clattered onto the tray table. A challenge coin. It sat there for exactly 2 seconds before Keisha's hand covered it, palm down, pressing it flat against the plastic surface. But Mrs. Ross had seen it. The eagle was unmistakable. The F-22 Raptor silhouette. The words around the edge, 525th Fighter Squadron Aim High. Oh my, Mrs. Ross's voice carried genuine warmth. My late husband was Air Force. That's a lovely souvenir. Did you buy it at a museum gift shop? Keisha slipped the coin back into her pocket, fingers moving with the kind of speed that came from muscle memory. Gift from a friend. Was your friend a pilot? Something like that. Before Mrs. Ross could ask more, the aircraft hit turbulence, not severe, but sudden enough that passengers gasped, drinks sloshed, and the seatbelt sign chimed back on. Most people grabbed armrests, bodies tensing against the unexpected movement. Keisha's body responded differently. Her posture shifted into a specific position without conscious thought. Back straight feet, flat, and slightly wider than shoulder-width core-engaged hands positioned to protect neck and chest. It lasted less than a second before she caught herself forced relaxation back into her shoulders. But 3 rows behind her, Master Sergeant Jerome Patterson saw it. He'd been watching her since boarding the way old soldiers watched anything that didn't fit the pattern. And that momentary shift, the way her body had automatically moved into ejection brace position that wasn't something civilians did, that was training. Patterson leaned forward in his seat, studied the back of her head with new intensity. Claire Bennett's voice came over the PA. Ladies and gentlemen, just a little light chop. Nothing to worry about. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. In first class, Grant Whitmore's voice rose above the captain's assurance. I swear these budget airlines just hire anyone. Probably DEI pilots who can't handle basic flying. Ashley Cunningham was filming again, her phone steady despite the turbulence. Literally shaking right now, is this even safe? Keisha's lips moved barely audible, even to Mrs. Ross sitting inches away. VREF plus 10. 32-knot crosswind component. Wind shear gradient 0.4 per 100 feet. Mrs. Ross blinked. What was that? Han? Keisha opened her eyes, managed a tired smile. Nothing. Just praying. But her left hand resting on the armrest was trembling again. The tremor was slight, but visible, a rhythmic shake that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with damaged nerves. Mrs. Ross's gaze found the scar behind Keisha's left ear. A thin, precise line that disappeared into her hairline. The kind of scar that came from medical intervention, emergency procedures, the type of trauma that left a permanent marks. Dear, are you sure you're all right? Keisha nodded, gripped the armrest tighter until the tremor stopped. Just tired, she said again. It was becoming her mantra. 1 hour into the flight, cruising at 37,000 feet, the first warning came. Captain Rivers's voice had lost some of its earlier warmth. Ladies and gentlemen, we're making a slight deviation to the south to avoid some weather activity. Nothing to be concerned about, just maintaining our smooth ride. Keisha's phone was already out the weather app, displaying information that made her frown deepen with each passing second. Volcanic ash advisory, Mount Pavlov-Aleutian Arc, active eruption, ash plume extending to FL-380, drifting southeast at 40 knots. She zoomed the map, traced the trajectory with her finger, calculated intercept angles in her head. "They're cutting it close," she murmured. Grant Whitmore's hearing was apparently excellent. His voice carried from first class through the gap in seats. "Oh, great now, some economy passenger thinks she knows better than trained pilots." Derek Walsh, the corporate lawyer sitting beside Grant, set down his tablet with practiced gravity. "You know, technically, civilians questioning cockpit decisions could be considered interference under FAA Regulation 121.580. Tyler had his phone out again. Camera angled back toward economy. "Guys, check this out. This woman is literally looking at pilot apps and criticizing the crew. Should we report her?" Ashley's live stream was up to 12,000 viewers now. So there's this sketchy woman on our flight, acting super weird like she thinks she's a pilot, low-key worried RN. The comments section filled with reactions ranging from concern to mockery. Keisha ignored it all, her focus locked on the weather display. Then the second announcement came. "Folks, this is the captain again." Rivers' voice had tightened, the professional calm stretched thinner. "We're experiencing some instrument anomalies. Nothing that affects flight safety, but we're working with air traffic control to verify our readings. Please remain seated while we sort this out." The cabin murmur shifted to something sharper. Nervous glances, whispered conversations, children picking up on adult anxiety. Grant stood his 6'2" frame commanding immediate attention. "I need to speak to the captain. This is unacceptable." Claire Bennett appeared immediately, her smile professional but firm. "Sir, please sit down. The cockpit is handling the situation. I paid $8,000 for this seat." Grant's volume increased deliberately. "I have a right to know if we're in danger." "Sir, you're not in danger. Please, don't tell me what I am or am not in danger of. I want answers." In 32C, Keisha closed her eyes, shut out the voices focused on sound. The engines, both turbofans running, but something was off. The left engine's pitch was 0.2% lower than the right, not enough for passengers to notice, not enough to trigger automatic warnings, but enough. "Pitot tube icing," she whispered to herself. "Typical at this altitude near ash particulate." Patterson, 3 rows back, had moved to the aisle seat. He heard her. He stood, walked forward, with the deliberate pace of someone who'd earned the right to move with purpose. Stopped beside Keisha's row, leaned down. "Excuse me, miss." His voice was low, respectful. "You just said pitot tube." Keisha looked up, startled. "I'm sorry. I was a pilot. Vietnam era, C-130s, then later F-4s. You just diagnosed a sensor failure before the cockpit announced it." "Lucky guess." Patterson's eyes still sharp, despite 70 years studied her face. "What's your name?" "Keisha." "Keisha what?" She hesitated. "Morgan." "Where'd you learn to recognize pitot tube failure by engine sound differential?" Before Keisha could answer, the aircraft lurched. Not turbulence this time. Something deeper. The kind of movement that came from flight control systems fighting conflicting inputs. Passengers screamed. Drinks spilled. The overhead bins rattled but held. And in that moment of chaos, Patterson saw Keisha's body do something that no civilian's body should do. She didn't grab the armrest. She didn't tense up. Her hands moved to protective position. Her core engaged, her breathing pattern shifted to combat rhythm. 4 counts in hold 8 out, and her eyes tracked the cabin ceiling, calculating structural stress points with the kind of automatic assessment that came from years of training in aircraft that could pull 9 Gs and tear themselves apart if you made one wrong decision. Then she caught herself, forced civilian fear back onto her face like a mask. But Patterson had seen it. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. The PA crackled before she could answer. Captain Rivers's voice, no longer calm, no longer reassuring. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a situation. Our flight instruments are giving us conflicting readings." Captain Rivers's voice carried tension that 17 years of airline experience couldn't quite hide. We're declaring pan-pan and diverting to Anchorage for precautionary landing. Flight attendants prepare the cabin. The word pan-pan hit the passengers like cold water. Not quite Mayday, but close enough that everyone knew this wasn't routine. The cabin erupted in controlled chaos. Children began crying. A woman 3 rows up started hyperventilating into a paper bag. Grant Whitmore's voice rose above them all. I knew it. This is criminal negligence. Ashley's live stream viewer count spiked to 40,000. OMG, we're literally crashing. Please say prayers for us. We are not crashing. Claire Bennett's voice cut through firm and professional. This is a precautionary diversion. Please remain calm and... The PA interrupted her. First Officer Evan Cross's voice, younger than the captain's stress, bleeding through every syllable. If there is anyone on board with multi-engine pilot experience, please identify yourself to the cabin crew immediately. 5 seconds of absolute silence. Then Keisha raised her hand. The movement was small, almost reluctant, but Claire saw it instantly. She rushed down the aisle, squeezed past the beverage cart. Ma'am, you're a pilot. I have... Keisha's voice was quiet, measured. Some experience. Hell no. Grant's voice boomed from first class. He was standing now, pointing down the aisle like a prosecutor before a jury. You're telling me you're going to let some random woman from economy into the cockpit? Derek Walsh stood beside him, lawyer instincts shifting into high gear. This is insane. She could be anyone. Ma'am, do you have credentials? An ATP license. Current medical certificate. Tyler was already filming. I literally saw her with a phone app earlier. That doesn't make you a pilot. Ashley's phone camera swung toward Keisha livestream chat, exploding with reactions. Guys, the flight attendants are trying to bring this woman, who looks homeless, into the cockpit. Is this real life? Keisha stood slowly, her worn hoodie catching on the seat as she moved into the aisle. Her left hand trembled slightly as she reached for the overhead bin to steady herself. The tremor was visible to everyone. Sir, step aside. Claire positioned herself between Grant and Keisha. Restrain me. Grant's face flushed red. I'm trying to save 300 lives from some DEI diversity stunt gone wrong. That's enough. Show me your license. Grant moved forward, physically blocking the aisle with his frame. Right now. Or I'm filing a federal complaint the moment we land, assuming we do land. Derek pulled out his phone, already recording. For the record, I'm documenting this entire interaction. If anything happens, this airline will face the largest negligence lawsuit in aviation history. Patterson stood his 70-year-old body, still carrying the authority of 30 years in uniform. Son, get out of her way. Who the hell are you, Grandpa? Retired Air Force, Master Sergeant. And that woman just diagnosed our instrument failure before your precious cockpit did. So move. Grant's laugh was sharp mocking. Oh, perfect. So now we have 2 people playing pilot, the homeless woman and the senior citizen. This is a circus. Tyler kept filming his commentary, a running feed for social media. This is insane. They're literally going to let someone with 0 credentials fly a commercial airliner. The aircraft dropped. 200 feet in 3 seconds, a stomach-lurching fall that sent everyone not seated crashing into ceilings, walls, armrests. Grant slammed into the overhead bin, his forehead connecting with the hard plastic. He fell into the aisle, blood streaming from his nose. Screams filled every corner of the cabin, except from 32C. Keisha hadn't fallen. Her body had automatically adjusted to the drop feet, planted knees bent core, engaged. The exact stance pilots trained for when aircraft departed controlled flight. Patterson saw it. Claire saw it. Even Derek, scrambling to his feet, saw it. Captain Rivers's voice returned all pretense of calm, abandoned. We've lost airspeed indication. Autopilot has disconnected. I need help in the cockpit now. Claire grabbed Keisha's arm. Please, come with me. Grant was on the floor, blood dripping onto the carpet, his voice a desperate rasp. "You're going to kill us all. You're going to kill everyone." Keisha stepped over him, followed Claire forward. But her left hand was shaking visibly now. The tremor that she'd been controlling through sheer willpower was breaking through her fingers, twitching involuntarily. Tyler's camera caught it in perfect high definition. Her hand is shaking. Look at her hand. She's not stable. Derek's still on the floor, but lawyer brain still functioning. "I'm formally stating for the record, this is criminally negligent endangerment. Every person on this aircraft is a witness." Mrs. Ross, still in her seat, reached out as Keisha passed. Their eyes met for just a moment. "Go save us, dear," the older woman whispered. Keisha's jaw tightened. She nodded once, then disappeared through the cockpit door. Behind her, the cabin descended into barely controlled panic. Grant was being helped up by Tyler, blood still flowing. Ashley was live streaming the chaos to 60,000 viewers. Derek was dictating notes into his phone about liability and negligence. And Patterson stood in the aisle staring at the closed cockpit door, his old heart pounding with something between hope and terror. Because he'd recognized what Keisha's body had done during that drop. And he absolutely knew that whatever happened next, that woman was their only chance. The cockpit was a symphony of chaos. Warning lights painted the instrument panel in angry reds and ambers. 3 different alarms competed for attention: altitude disagree airspeed, unreliable autopilot disconnect. The yoke vibrated under Captain Rivers' white-knuckled grip as he fought to keep the aircraft level with instruments he couldn't trust. Thank God. Rivers didn't look up from the controls. "Who are you?" "Keisha Morgan. I have flight experience." First Officer Evan Cross. 28 years old and 3 years out of flight school, turned in his seat. His eyes were wide, scared, but still sharp enough to assess. "What type Cessna?" "Because this is a 777-300 ER with 300 souls on board." "Multi-engine, turbine-rated, high-performance aircraft." Rivers' voice cracked slightly. "We need help now. Both pitot tubes are giving us garbage airspeed, showing 170 knots on one side, 420 on the other. Autopilot kicked offline. Engines are surging intermittently." Keisha's eyes scanned the instrument panel with the kind of rapid assessment that came from muscle memory. Primary flight display, conflicting airspeed indicators. Altitude disagreement between captain and first officer displays. Engine N1 readings showing left engine 0.5% low. Pitot static system failure. She said, her voice calm, in a way that made both pilots turn to look at her. "Both tubes iced over. You're flying on standby instruments only. The engine surge is volcanic ash ingestion. You need to climb immediately before you get compressor stall." Evan's hands froze on the controls. "Climb, we're already at max altitude for our weight. The ash cloud is at 35,000 feet. You need FL 390 minimum, or descend to FL 280 and route around. But you don't have fuel for route around." Rivers' jaw clenched. "How do you know our fuel state?" "Because Anchorage is 400 nautical miles from our last position, and you've been burning at standard cruise consumption for 90 minutes. You've got maybe 90 minutes left before you're running on fumes." Jesus Christ! Rivers' hands were shaking now. "Who are you?" "Someone who's flown through volcanic ash, twice." Before either pilot could respond, the left engine fire warning blared. Engine fire left. The master warning light bathed the cockpit in red. Evan's training kicked in automatically, hand reaching for the engine fire handle. Fire left engine initiating shutdown. "Don't." Keisha's voice cut through like a blade. "It's not fire. Ash particles are triggering the thermal sensors. If you shut down that engine now, you're landing on one engine with partial hydraulics." Evan's hand froze inches from the handle. "How do you know that?" "Because I've seen it before. Because the fire warning came on without smoke. without temperature spike, without hydraulic pressure loss in the fire suppression system. It's a false alarm. Rivers made his decision. Evan, leave the engine running. Climb to FL390. Now. Evan pushed the throttles forward, pulled back on the yoke. The aircraft's nose pitched up the climb angle steep enough that passengers in the cabin felt the pressure change immediately. Then, the hydraulic pressure warning illuminated. HYD press low. System. Keisha was already scanning the hydraulic synoptic display. You're losing fluid. Pitot heat failure is cascading through your electrical system. Check the circuit breakers. Rivers reached up to the overhead panel, found 3 breakers popped. Pitot, heat hydraulic pump, auxiliary alternate static source, all tripped. Reset them, in that order. Pitot heat first. It'll take 30 seconds to warm up and clear the ice. Then hydraulics. Then alternate static. Rivers' fingers moved quickly, pushing each breaker back into position. 5 seconds. 10. 15. The airspeed indicators flickered, jumped, then began converging on a single reading. 340 knots. The altitude disagree warning chimed off. The engine surge smoothed out. It's working, Evan breathed. But the hydraulic pressure gauge was still dropping. System A down to 40%. System B holding at 70, but declining. The radio crackled to life. United 227 Anchorage Center. We copy your pan-pan. Say intentions and souls on board. Rivers keyed the mic, his voice steadier, now that someone was helping. Anchorage United 227 requesting priority handling for Anchorage. Multiple instrument failures, partial hydraulics. 312 souls on board, 5 hours fuel remaining. Roger United 227. Cleared direct Anchorage. Descend and maintain flight level 280. Emergency equipment will be standing by. Keisha leaned forward slightly. Captain, request foam on the runway. You're going to land with degraded hydraulics, no nose wheel steering, reduced braking effectiveness. Rivers stared at her for a beat, then keyed the mic again. Anchorage, request runway foam. We'll have limited braking capability on landing. United 227 runway 07 right will be foamed. Winds currently 320 at 25, gusting 38. Evan's face went pale. 38-knot crosswind with partial hydraulics. Keisha's voice remained steady. It's doable. I'll talk you through the crab and kick technique. You've done this before. A pause. Then quietly, yes. Descend at 1,800 feet per minute. Keisha's voice had shifted into something different. Now, not quite command, but close enough that both pilots found themselves following her instructions without question. When you reach flight level 200, pitch up 2 degrees. The ash density thins in warmer air. Rivers followed her guidance, pulling the throttles back slightly, letting the aircraft settle into descent. The clouds outside the cockpit windows were dark gray, thick with particulate that looked like fog but would tear jet engines apart like sandpaper on silk. 18,000 feet, 16,000, 12,000. Pitch up. Now. Rivers pulled back 2 degrees. The ash cleared as if someone had drawn back a curtain. Suddenly the instrument steadied. The engine temperature readings normalized, the vibration in the airframe smoothed out. It worked, Evan said, disbelief coloring every syllable. Volcanic ash is denser in the lower, colder atmospheric layers. Keisha's tone was matter-of-fact clinical. Basic volcanic meteorology. You fly under it, or over it, never through it. Rivers glanced at her, really looked at her for the first time since she'd entered the cockpit. The worn hoodie, the tired eyes, the left hand that trembled slightly, even now. Where did you learn that? Classified missions, long time ago. Before Rivers could press further, the radio crackled again. Different voice this time, military precision, not civilian ATC. United 227, this is Elmendorf Air Force Base Command. We have a request from higher authority. Please confirm identity of assisting passenger currently in cockpit. Rivers and Evan exchanged glances. Rivers keyed the mic. Elmendorf, standby one. He looked at Keisha. They're asking about you. Her jaw tightened. Captain, don't answer that. Why not? Because if they verify who I am, this gets complicated. Evan turned in his seat. Are you in some kind of trouble? No. She met his eyes. But the second they confirm my identity, this stops being a simple assist and becomes a formal military aviation incident. Paperwork, debriefs, investigations. Your passengers have been through enough. Let's just get them on the ground. Rivers studied her face, seeing something in her expression that made him nod slowly. Okay, for now. But Evan wasn't satisfied. What aren't you telling us? Before Keisha could answer, the hydraulic pressure alarm chimed. HYD press low, System B. The gauge dropped from 70% to 40 in 10 seconds. You're losing System B now, Keisha said, her voice shifting back to clinical calm. Anchorage, how far? Rivers checked the navigation display. 50 miles. You'll make it, but you're landing with partial hydraulics only. No auto brakes, no thrust reversers, limited nose wheel steering. You'll need every foot of that runway. The radio came again, the military voice more insistent. United 227. Elmendorf Command requires identification confirmation for safety protocols. Is assisting passenger a current or former military aviator? Rivers hesitated, hand on the mic. Keisha shook her head slightly. But in the cabin, Dr. Helen Reyes had entered to check on Rivers' condition. She'd overheard the radio call through the open cockpit door, and Patterson, standing near the cockpit entrance despite Claire's repeated requests to sit, had heard it too. The old master sergeant's eyes widened with understanding. He turned to the passengers nearest him, including Derek, still documenting everything on his phone. That woman's military, Patterson said quietly. That's why she knows what she's doing. Tyler's camera was still rolling. The live stream was up to 90,000 viewers now. And somewhere in Elmendorf Air Force Base Operations Center, a records officer was pulling up files on every Keisha Morgan who'd ever worn an Air Force uniform. The pieces were moving into place, whether Keisha wanted them to or not. 15 miles from Anchorage, 13 minutes from wheels down. Captain Rivers was setting up the approach when his left hand suddenly clenched against his chest. The yoke jerked left. Captain, Evan grabbed his own controls, fighting the uncommanded roll. Rivers' face had gone gray. His breathing came in short, desperate gasps. I can't, my chest. Captain, Evan's voice cracked. Stay with me. Cardiac episode. Rivers' eyes were unfocused, his hand still gripping his chest. Take controls. Evan's hands locked on the yoke, frozen with panic. I've only got 800 hours. I've never landed with hydraulic failure. Keisha didn't hesitate. Move! You're not type rated on this aircraft. You want to argue credentials or land this plane? Rivers, barely conscious, managed to nod toward Evan. Let her... Keisha was already reaching for the intercom. Medical emergency in cockpit. Is there a doctor on board? In the cabin, Dr. Helen Reyes was moving before the announcement finished. She rushed forward, squeezed past. Claire entered the cramped cockpit space. Behind her, the cabin erupted. Who's flying the plane? Grant's voice, even bleeding and injured, carried authority born of money and entitlement. Tyler's livestream chat was scrolling too fast to read. Mystery woman is flying now. This is insane. Ashley's camera shook as she filmed. We're all going to die because they let some random person take the controls. Derek's voice rose above the chaos lawyer instincts overriding fear. I'm formally stating for the record, this is criminal negligence. Every person on this aircraft is a witness to this airline's complete disregard for passenger safety. In the cockpit, Keisha slid into the captain's seat as Dr. Reyes began working on Rivers. Her hands found the controls. The tremor was worse now, visible, undeniable. Her left hand shook as it gripped the yoke, the damaged nerves finally giving up their fight against exhaustion and stress. Evan saw it. Your hand? I know. You're on throttles and flaps. I'll handle pitch and roll. Call out altitude and speed. 5,000 feet. Evan's voice cracked. Speed 180 knots. You're high and fast. I'm accounting for wind shear on final. The radio. United 227. You are cleared to land runway 07 right. Say, pilot in command. Evan looked at Keisha. She keyed the mic, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hand. Anchorage Tower United 227. Pilot in command is Keisha Morgan. Silence on the frequency. Then a different voice. Military, male. Carrying weight that made both pilots straighten unconsciously. Keisha Morgan. Call sign Phantom. The cockpit froze. Evan stared at Keisha. What did he just say? Keisha's eyes remained fixed on the approach path, but her jaw tightened. The voice continued. Phantom, this is Elmendorf Air Force Base Command Center. Confirming is this Captain Keisha Morgan, 525th Fighter Squadron. Evan's whisper was barely audible. Oh my God, yet your Air Force was, Keisha said tightly, past tense. Then the left engine fire warning illuminated. Engine fire left. Not a false alarm this time. Real temperature spike. Real ash ingestion. Real compressor stall. The engine roared, coughed, and died. Silence from the left turbofan. Only the right engine screaming now. We just lost an engine. Evan's training evaporated into panic. Keisha's hands moved without hesitation, shutting down the left engine, adjusting trim, compensating for asymmetric thrust. I see it. Shutting down left engine. We're landing single engine. Single engine on a 757. That's possible. I've done it before. The radio again, the military voice returning with new authority. Phantom, this is Commander Sarah Vance Elmendorf, AFB. We're vectoring you for straight-in approach. Emergency equipment is rolling. You have priority airspace. All other traffic is being held. Keisha keyed the mic. Copy, Commander. A pause. Then softer. Phantom, it's good to hear your voice again. Tears threatened at the corners of Keisha's eyes, but her voice remained steady. Likewise, ma'am. In the cabin, passengers on the left side saw the dead engine, saw the motionless turbofan blades, saw the fire trucks rolling onto the runway ahead of them. Mass panic. Children screaming. Adults praying. Someone vomiting from sheer terror. Patterson stood his voice, cutting through the chaos with parade ground authority. Everyone calm down, that woman up front is a fighter pilot. She's got this. Grant nose bandaged and blood-stained. His voice hysterical. A fighter pilot, she's a decorated combat veteran. Patterson finished. Now sit down and let her work. 3 miles from runway threshold. Single engine. Partial hydraulics. 38-knot crosswind gusting to 45. The numbers scrolled through Keisha's mind like a combat briefing she'd run 1,000 times before. Gear down, she said, her voice carrying none of the chaos swirling around her. Evan hesitated, hand on the gear lever. With one engine, we don't have a choice. Gear down, now. He pulled the lever. The mechanical grind of hydraulic actuators filled the cockpit slower than normal, struggling against reduced pressure. The left main gear indicator illuminated green, then the right. The nose gear light stayed dark. Nose gear isn't locked. Evan's voice climbed an octave. Keisha's eyes scanned the hydraulic synoptic display. It's down, just not locked. The sensor's receiving partial signal through degraded hydraulics. We'll get 3 green on weight on wheels. How do you know? Because I've landed with worse. Doctor. Reyes worked behind them, administering oxygen to Rivers, checking his pulse, her medical training fighting against turbulence and terror. He's stable, but unconscious. Possible cardiac event. He needs a hospital. 2 minutes. Keisha said without taking her eyes off the approach path. The runway appeared through the windscreen, a long gray ribbon flanked by emergency vehicles, fire trucks, ambulances, foam trucks already spraying white suppressant across the concrete. Speed 165. Evan called out, his voice shaking but functional. Sink rate 700, localizer centered, glide slope, you're half a dot high. Intentional, single engine approach requires higher energy state. I'll dissipate it on flare. The aircraft shuddered as another gust hit from the left quarter. The nose yawed right the dead left engine, creating asymmetric drag that wanted to spin them into the ground. Keisha's right hand moved the yoke with millimeter precision, her left still trembling, working the throttle on the remaining engine. Not too much power, or they'd accelerate. Not too little, or they'd sink. The balance was everything. Crosswind correction, she said aloud, more for Evan's benefit than her own. 20-degree crab into the wind. I'll kick it straight at 50 feet. That's a fighter technique. This is a 777. Physics doesn't care about aircraft type. Wind is wind, wings are wings, trust me. Through the cockpit door, the cabin was a barely controlled nightmare. Passengers sobbing, children screaming, Grant's voice rising above it all. We're going to die because of her. Patterson's response cut through like a blade. Shut your mouth. Let her fly. 1 mile. Speed 155. Sink rate 550. The runway lights flashed past white, white, red, and white. They were slightly high, slightly fast, but within limits. Barely. 500 feet, Evan called. Keisha's hands made constant corrections. Left, right, power up, power back. The aircraft responding sluggishly through degraded hydraulics, every input delayed by half a second that felt like eternity. 400. The foam on the runway reflected orange in the landing lights. Emergency vehicles tracked their approach, ready to chase them down the instant wheels touched. 300. You're on glide slope. Speed 150. Wind shear warning. Wind shear, wind shear. Wind shear. The aircraft dropped 20 feet in 1 second. Evan gasped. Keisha added, power arrested the sink, kept the nose steady. 200 feet. Speed 145. Her left hand's tremor was violent now, the stick shaking under her palm. But her right hand, her primary flight control hand, was steady as stone. 100 feet. Anchorage Tower final transmission. United 227, winds 330 at 40, gusting 48. You're cleared to land. 2. Godspeed. 50 feet. Keisha kicked right rudder. The nose swung violently, aligning with the runway centerline. The aircraft hung suspended in that perfect moment between flight and fall, brace for impact. Claire's voice echoed through the cabin, and they dropped. The main gear hit first. Not a gentle touchdown, not even a firm landing. A controlled crash that sent shockwaves through the entire airframe, overhead bins, popping open oxygen masks, deploying from half the ceiling panels. The aircraft bounced 15 feet back into the air, then slammed down again. This time it stayed. Keisha shoved the yoke forward. The nose gear hit hard enough to crack the windscreen in a spiderweb pattern radiating from the lower right corner. Thrust reverse. Evan reached for the lever. No reversers. Hydraulics are dead. Manual brakes only. Keisha's feet found the brake pedals, applied pressure with the precise rhythm she'd learned in a different aircraft. A different life. Too much, and the wheels locked, sending them into an uncontrollable skid. Too little, and they'd never stop before the overrun. The foam made everything worse, lubricating the tires, reducing friction, turning the runway into something between concrete and ice. 90 knots. 85, 80. The end of the runway approached with mathematical certainty. We're not going to stop, Evan's voice. Yes, we are. 70 knots, 65. Emergency vehicles paced them, fire trucks, matching their speed, ready for the worst. 50 knots. 40. The overrun markers flashed past yellow-painted crosses that marked where pavement ended and dirt began. 30 knots. 20. The aircraft shuddered to a stop. Silence. Not peaceful silence, shocked silence. The silence of 312 people realizing they were still breathing. Then the cockpit erupted. Emergency evacuation. Claire's voice through the PA. Unfasten seat belts. Leave everything. Proceed to exits. But before anyone could move, the radio crackled. United 227 Anchorage Tower. Outstanding job. Say pilot in command name again for the record. Keisha's hand trembled as she reached for the mic. Keisha Morgan. Evan was staring at her like he'd never seen her before. Phantom. They called you Phantom. She unbuckled her harness, didn't answer. That's not a commercial call sign. That's military. Fighter pilots only. The cockpit door burst open. Patterson stood there, his 70-year-old frame filling the doorway, tears streaming down his face. Captain Morgan, his voice broke. I flew F-4s over Vietnam. Lost 3 wingmen to SAM sites. I know what you just did. That wasn't flying. That was art. Behind him, Dr. Reyes was still working on Rivers, but she looked up. You saved 300 lives with one engine in a crosswind. That's not possible. It's possible if you've done it before, Keisha said quietly. Evan's hands were shaking as he shut down the remaining engine. Where did you do it before? Keisha reached into her hoodie pocket, pulled out the challenge coin that had fallen earlier, set it on the center console between them. The F-22 Raptor gleamed under the cockpit lights. 525th Fighter Squadron. The words around the edge read, Phantom, Air Superiority, No Mercy. Evan picked it up with reverent hands. You flew Raptors. Past tense. How long? 8 years active duty. 3 deployments, 2 classified. Patterson stepped fully into the cockpit, his military-bearing automatic. Ma'am, may I ask, why aren't you still flying? Keisha's jaw tightened. Her left hand trembled against her thigh. Because 8 months ago, my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Someone had to take care of her. The Air Force doesn't pause deployments for family medical leave. The cockpit fell silent again. Through the windscreen, emergency crews were positioning stairs, media vans arriving, the world about to discover what just happened. And in the cabin behind them, Grant Whitmore's voice rose one more time. I'm suing this airline, the FAA, and that woman for key. Patterson turned his voice carrying decades of command authority. Son, that woman just saved your miserable life. You'll show respect, or I'll throw you off this plane myself. Grant's mouth closed. The door opened to the stairs outside, and Keisha Morgan, wearing a hoodie worth $15 and carrying trauma she'd never asked for, stepped out into the lights and cameras and chaos of a world that had just learned her name. The stairs locked against the forward door. Cold Anchorage air rushed into the cabin, carrying the smell of jet fuel foam suppressant and something electric that always accompanied emergency responses. Keisha stepped onto the platform, and the world exploded with light. Camera flashes, video lights, news helicopters hovering at regulation distance telephoto lenses capturing every pixel of her worn hoodie and exhausted face. At the base of the stairs, a reception committee waited. Commander Sarah Vance, U.S. Air Force, stood at attention in full dress uniform despite the late hour. Beside her, 2 Air Force Security Forces personnel flanked a man in civilian clothes, FAA inspector credentials clipped to his belt. Captain Morgan, Vance's salute was crisp, formal. Permission to come aboard. Keisha descended the stairs slowly, her legs unsteady after 2 hours of combat-level adrenaline. Commander, this is a civilian aircraft. You don't need my permission. Vance's smile was slight but genuine. Humor me, Phantom. Old habits. Behind them, Grant Whitmore was being helped down the stairs by paramedics, nose-bandaged face, pale with shock and rage. Tyler filmed everything. Ashley's live stream had peaked at 200,000 viewers. The FAA inspector stepped forward, badge out. Ms. Morgan, I'm Inspector Robert Graves, FAA Flight Standards. I need to verify your credentials for the incident report. I don't have my license with me. Then I'll need your certificate number for database verification. Keisha recited it from memory. Numbers she hadn't spoken aloud in 8 months. Graves typed into a tablet, frowned, typed more. His frown deepened. Your ATP is current, but it shows administrative hold status. You're listed as Inactive Reserve Military Separation Code, JFV Voluntary Separation for Family Humanitarian Reasons. That's correct. But your type rating is, Graves scrolled. This says you're qualified on F-22 Raptor F-15E, Strike Eagle F-16 Fighting Falcon. He looked up confusion, replacing bureaucratic efficiency. There's no 777 rating here. Technically, you weren't legally qualified to operate that aircraft. Grant, overhearing from 15 feet away, found his voice. What she wasn't even qualified. Derek was already recording on his phone. Inspector, for the record, are you stating that Ms. Morgan operated a commercial transport aircraft without proper certification? I'm stating that her license doesn't show. Commander Vance interrupted, her voice carrying parade ground authority. Inspector Graves, may I clarify something? Commander, Captain Morgan's flight records are partially classified. What you're seeing on FAA database is her civilian overlay. Her military qualification jacket includes multi-engine transport certification from her time as a test pilot at Edwards Air Force Base. She's qualified on C-17 KC-135 and was part of the Joint Test Program for the 777's military derivative. She has more hours on heavy aircraft than most commercial pilots will see in a career. Graves blinked. That's not in the civilian database? Because it's classified DoD training records. I can provide verification codes if needed. Yes. Please do. Grant's voice rose to a shout. This is a cover-up. You're making excuses for... Mr. Whitmore. A new voice female, carrying the weight of authority that made even Grant pause. A woman in an expensive suit approached, flanked by 2 more people in airline uniforms. Her credentials read, Patricia Hammond, Vice President of Flight Operations, United Airlines. Mr. Whitmore, before you say another word, I suggest you speak with our legal team. Ms. Morgan saved 312 lives tonight, including yours. If you proceed with litigation, United's attorneys will ensure that every passenger on this aircraft testifies about your behavior, your obstruction of crew duties, and your physical interference with emergency procedures. Derek stepped forward. Lawyer instincts engaged. Are you threatening? I'm informing. We have cabin camera footage. We have cockpit voice recorder. We have witness statements from crew and passengers. If you want to sue, we'll file counterclaims for interference with flight crew duties under 49 U.S.C. 46504. That's a federal felony, Mr. Walsh. Derek's face went pale. Hammond turned to Keisha. Ms. Morgan, on behalf of United Airlines, I want to personally thank you. You've been through hell tonight. We have a hotel-arranged medical evaluation if you need it, and our full support for whatever comes next. I need to get to Seattle. My mother. We have a charter standing by. You'll be airborne in 30 minutes. Keisha's throat tightened. Thank you. Behind the official reception, passengers were descending emergency slides being triaged by paramedics. Mrs. Ross spotted Keisha, broke from the paramedic trying to check her vitals, and rushed over. You saved us. The older woman's arms wrapped around Keisha in a grandmother's embrace. You saved us all, dear. Patterson appeared next, his military bearing making the crowd part. Captain Morgan, it would be an honor to shake your hand. The handshake became a salute, his instinctive hers hesitant. More passengers approached. The mother with young children, the businessman who'd sat silently in 28D, even some from first-class shame written across their faces. But Grant and his group stood apart, Derek and Tyler, filming everything. Ashley's live stream still running, capturing Keisha's face with a woman who looked like she just wanted to disappear. And in the growing crowd of emergency responders, one face stood out. A man in civilian clothes standing beside an unmarked government vehicle, watching Keisha with intense focus. His credentials, if she could have seen them, would have read Defense Intelligence Agency. The Mediterranean incident wasn't as buried as she'd hoped. The hotel room was generic comfort, beige walls, industrial carpet, a bed that promised rest Keisha's body desperately needed, but her mind wouldn't allow. She'd been there for 2 hours. The clock read 2:47 a.m. Her phone had been ringing nonstop. News outlets, aviation publications, someone claiming to be from 60 Minutes. She ignored them all. The only call she answered was from Seattle Grace Medical Center. "Ms. Morgan, your mother's vitals have stabilized. You can visit in the morning." Morning. 6 hours away. An eternity when every minute felt like it might be the last. She sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing the hoodie, and pulled out her phone to check news coverage. The headlines made her stomach drop. Mystery woman lands crippled plane, but was she qualified? Unqualified passenger takes controls. FAA investigating. Tech billionaire claims near-death experience due to airline negligence. Grant Whitmore had given an interview from his hospital bed, nose bandaged, dramatically voice quavering with manufactured trauma. "I'm grateful to be alive, but this should never have happened. That woman had no business in a cockpit. She wasn't qualified. She wasn't trained. And the airline enabled it. My attorneys are preparing the largest negligence lawsuit in aviation history." Derek Walsh appeared in the same segment. United Airlines violated federal regulations by allowing an uncertified individual to operate a commercial aircraft. "We're seeking damages, not just for our client's trauma, but to ensure this never happens again." Tyler's social media posts had gone viral. The shaky phone video of Keisha's trembling hand, the clips of Grant bleeding in the aisle. The narrative carefully constructed airline desperation leads to dangerous decision. Ashley's livestream highlight reel edited for maximum drama. "We literally thought we were going to die." The counter-narrative existed too. Passengers defending Keisha Patterson's military endorsement Commander Vance's statement, but it was drowning in the louder, more sensational story. The knock on her door came at 3:15 a.m. Keisha checked the peephole. A woman in a dark suit, credentials, held up Special Agent Rebecca Santos, FAA Office of Accident Investigation. Keisha opened the door. "Ms. Morgan, I apologize for the hour. May I come in? Do I have a choice?" "You're not under arrest. This is just preliminary fact-finding." They sat at the small table. Santos pulled out a tablet, began her questions with clinical precision. "Walk me through your decision to enter the cockpit." Keisha recounted it, the PA announcement her raised hand Claire's request. "At what point did you take primary flight controls when Captain Rivers became incapacitated? Were you asked to take controls, or did you assume them?" The question was loaded. Keisha knew it. The captain was unconscious. The first officer was inexperienced with hydraulic failures. Someone had to fly the aircraft. "And you determined that someone was you." "Yes." Santos made notes. "Mr. Whitmore's attorneys are claiming you were never properly vetted, that the airline allowed an unknown passenger into the cockpit without credential verification. The captain was having a cardiac event. There wasn't time for a credential check. But you understand why that's problematic from a regulatory standpoint. I understand that 300 people are alive. That seems like the more important standpoint." Santos looked up from her tablet. Ms. Morgan, I'm not your enemy, but I need to prepare you for what's coming. The FAA has to investigate any incident involving pilot incapacitation and non-standard crew operations. Add in the lawsuit, the media attention, and the fact that Grant Whitmore has significant political connections. What are you saying? I'm saying that no good deed goes unpunished. You saved lives, but you also violated about 6 different regulations doing it. The law doesn't care about outcomes, it cares about procedures. Keisha's left hand trembled against her thigh. So what happens now? Formal hearing, probably in 2 weeks. You'll need legal representation. The airline will provide it, but... Santos hesitated. There are people who want to make an example of this, not because you did anything wrong, but because you represent a legal gray area they want clarified. Will I lose my license? You might lose more than that. If Whitmore's attorneys can prove that United knew you were unqualified and allowed you to fly anyway, they could argue criminal negligence. You could face charges. The room felt smaller suddenly, colder. I need to see my mother. I understand. But Ms. Morgan... Santos stood handed over a business card. Don't talk to media. Don't make any statements. And get a lawyer. A good one. Because this isn't over. She left. Keisha sat alone in the generic hotel room, holding her phone, looking at the message from the hospital. Your mother is asking for you. She'd saved 312 lives tonight, and it might cost her everything. The FAA hearing room in Seattle was designed for intimidation. Long conference table. American flag in the corner. Recording equipment visible on every surface. Large windows overlooking the tarmac where a dozen aircraft taxied in morning light aircraft that Keisha would never fly again if this went badly. Grant Whitmore sat across from her, Derek Walsh beside him. Both men in expensive suits that cost more than Keisha's entire wardrobe. Tyler and Ashley sat in the gallery phones out ready to live stream the moment permission was granted. The FAA panel consisted of 3 officials. Regional Administrator Karen Foster, Inspector Graves, and a legal counsel named Martin Price. United's attorney, David Chen, sat beside Keisha. He'd briefed her for 2 hours yesterday. His main advice, let me do the talking. But Keisha knew how this worked. She'd faced enough military boards of inquiry to recognize the pattern. Administrator Foster opened the hearing. This is a preliminary fact-finding session regarding United Flight 227 November 14th. We're here to determine if any regulatory violations occurred that require further action. Derek Walsh immediately stood. Administrator? Before we begin, I'd like to enter into the record that my client, Mr. Whitmore, suffered significant physical and psychological trauma due to United Airlines' decision to allow an unqualified individual to operate. Mr. Walsh, this isn't a trial. Foster's voice was firm. You'll have opportunity to speak. Please sit. Derek sat, but his point was made. For 90 minutes they went through the incident. Captain Rivers's cardiac event, Evan Cross's call for assistance, Keisha's entry into the cockpit. Then Grant was invited to speak. I want everyone to understand something. His voice carried practiced emotion. I have flown over 2 million miles in my lifetime. I know aviation. I know safety protocols. And what happened on that flight was criminal negligence. He turned to face Keisha directly. This woman wearing a hoodie, like she was going to do laundry, enters the cockpit, and suddenly she's flying a 777 no-credential check, no verification. For all we knew, she could have been a terrorist. Mr. Whitmore, Chen began, I'm not finished. My life was endangered. My colleagues' lives were endangered. 300 people nearly died because United decided diversity optics were more important than actual qualifications. The word diversity hung in the air like poison gas. Keisha's jaw tightened. Chen leaned over to whisper, Don't respond. Let me handle. Keisha stood. Ms. Morgan, Foster began. "May I speak, Administrator?" A pause. Then, "You may." Keisha walked around the table, positioned herself directly across from Grant. Her worn jeans and gray t-shirt a stark contrast to his $3,000 suit. "Mr. Whitmore, you're right about one thing. You didn't know who I was when I entered that cockpit." Her voice was calm, measured. "You didn't know because you never asked. You saw the hoodie. You saw a black woman from economy class. And you decided that was all you needed to know. That's not... You blocked the aisle. You physically prevented me from assisting the crew. You bled on the floor and told everyone I was going to kill them. And when we landed safely, when all 312 people walked off that aircraft alive, you immediately started planning your lawsuit." Grant's face flushed. "Because you weren't qualified." Keisha pulled out a folder Chen had prepared, opened it. "My qualifications: 8 years active duty Air Force, 3,200 flight hours, 525th Fighter Squadron, call sign Phantom." She placed the first document on the table, her service record. "I'm qualified on F-22, F-15E, F-16, plus multi-engine transport aircraft, including the 777's military derivative. I was a test pilot at Edwards Air Force Base for 3 years." Second document, her flight certifications. "I have flown through volcanic ash, twice. I have landed aircraft with partial hydraulics, 4 times. I have landed single engine, 7 times. Third document, her combat decorations. "I have 2 air medals, a Distinguished Flying Cross, and a commendation for saving 3 pilots in a mission over hostile territory when half my aircraft's controls were shot out." The room had gone completely silent. "So when you say, 'I'm not qualified,' Mr. Whitmore, what you really mean is that I don't look like what you think qualified looks like. You mean that my hoodie and my skin color and my quiet voice don't match your mental image of competence." She leaned forward, her voice dropping, but losing none of its edge. "I saved your life. I saved your colleagues' lives. I did it with 1 engine partial hydraulics and a crosswind that exceeded aircraft limitations. I did it while you were on the floor, bleeding and screaming that I was going to kill everyone." Grant opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to withdraw your lawsuit. You're going to issue a public apology, and you're going to donate $1 million to the Alaskan Air Guard Emergency Response Fund, the people who foamed that runway and had equipment standing by to save your ungrateful life." Or, Derek found his voice, "or I release the cockpit voice recorder transcript, all of it, every word you said, every racist assumption, every moment you prioritized your ego over 300 lives, and we let the public decide who should be held accountable for what happened on that flight." She straightened, turned to Administrator Foster. "Ma'am, I violated procedures. I accept that. I entered a cockpit without formal authorization. I operated an aircraft while not currently employed by the airline. If there are consequences for that, I'll face them." She looked back at Grant. "But I will not apologize for saving lives. Not to him. Not to anyone." The silence stretched for 10 seconds. Then Administrator Foster spoke. "Mr. Whitmore, I think we're done here." Grant Whitmore's face had gone from red to white. His mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. Derek Walsh recovered first his lawyer instincts scrambling. "Administrator Foster, this is clearly intimidation. Ms. Morgan is threatening our client." "I'm offering a settlement," Keisha interrupted. "One that keeps this out of civil court, criminal court, and the media circus that benefits no one." Foster leaned back in her chair, studying Keisha with new eyes. "Ms. Morgan, you're not represented by counsel in this proceeding. Are you sure you want to? I don't need counsel to tell the truth." The door opened. Commander Sarah Vance entered, now accompanied by 2 additional officers, a full colonel with pilot wings and combat ribbons, and a civilian woman whose credentials identified her as DOD General Counsel. Administrator Foster. Vance's voice carried formal authority. I apologize for the interruption, but there's classified information relevant to this proceeding that requires immediate clarification. Foster's eyebrows rose. Commander, this is a civilian FAA hearing, which is why we need to clarify Captain Morgan's full qualification status before this proceeds further. Vance placed a sealed folder on the table. This contains Captain Morgan's complete military flight record, including classified test pilot certifications. The colonel stepped forward. I'm Colonel James Mitchell, 412th Test, Wing Edwards Air Force Base. Captain Morgan served under my command for 3 years as a developmental test pilot. Her qualifications include not just fighter aircraft, but large multi-engine platforms. She was part of the Joint FAA Air Force Certification Program for Flight Control System Redundancy. He opened the folder, revealing documents stamped with classification markings. She has logged over 800 hours on 777 aircraft and variants more than many commercial pilots. Those hours were classified because they involved testing military modifications. Captain Morgan is not only qualified to fly that aircraft, she helped write the Emergency Procedures Manual for hydraulic failure scenarios. The room fell into stunned silence. Graves stared at the documents. This changes everything. It changes nothing about procedure, Foster said carefully. But it does establish that Ms. Morgan's actions were based on legitimate expertise, not reckless endangerment. Grant found his voice shrill with desperation. This is a cover-up. They're manufacturing credentials to Mr. Whitmore. The DOD counsel's voice was ice. I would be very careful about accusing the Department of Defense of falsifying military records. That's a serious allegation with serious legal consequences. Derek put a hand on Grant's arm, silencing him. Commander Vance turned to Keisha. Captain Morgan, there's one more thing the panel should know. The reason you left active duty. Keisha's jaw tightened. Commander, that's personal. It's relevant. Vance's voice softened. 3 years ago, Captain Morgan was on a classified mission over hostile territory. Her flight lead made a tactical decision that would have resulted in civilian casualties. Captain Morgan refused the order, engaged the flight lead's aircraft to prevent the strike, and accepted a formal reprimand rather than allow innocent deaths. She placed another document on the table. She was awarded the Airman's Medal, the Air Force's highest non-combat valor decoration for that action. Then 8 months ago, when her mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer, she voluntarily separated from service to provide care. She gave up a career, a pension, and her life's calling because family mattered more. Vance looked directly at Grant. So, when you question her character, Mr. Whitmore, understand who you're talking about. You're talking about someone who sacrificed everything twice to save lives. The silence was absolute. Foster cleared her throat. Mr. Whitmore, Mr. Walsh, I think Commander Vance has made her point. The FAA's preliminary finding is that Ms. Morgan's actions, while technically outside standard operating procedures, were justified by emergency circumstances and supported by legitimate expertise. We will not be pursuing regulatory action. She turned to Keisha. Ms. Morgan, on behalf of the Federal Aviation Administration, I want to thank you for your service, both military and civilian. You exemplify everything we want pilots to be. Grant started to stand face purple with rage. Derek pulled him back down, whispered urgently in his ear. After a moment, Grant's shoulders slumped. Fine, he said through clenched teeth. We'll drop the suit. And the donation? Keisha asked. A long pause. Then $1 million to the Alaskan Air Guard. And the apology. Grant's face twisted, but Derek was already typing on his phone. We'll draft something appropriate, Foster nodded. Then this hearing is concluded. As people began gathering papers, Tyler raised his phone. Can I ask? No, Vance said flatly. No questions, no recordings. This proceeding is over. Keisha stood, legs unsteady, moved toward the door. Patterson was waiting in the hallway, Mrs. Ross beside him. We've been here the whole time, the older woman said, in case you needed witnesses. Keisha's throat tightened. Thank you. No, dear. Mrs. Ross took her hand. Thank you. That night in her mother's hospital room, Keisha sat in the visitor's chair while machines beeped their steady rhythm of life support. Her mother, Gloria Morgan, 62 years old, 58 pounds lighter than she'd been a year ago, slept fitfully under thin blankets. Keisha closed her eyes, and the memory came unbidden. 3 years ago, Syrian airspace. Call sign Phantom, leading a flight of 4 F-22s on what should have been a simple reconnaissance mission. The target appeared on radar, a convoy moving through the desert. Intelligence said insurgent supply line. Flight lead Major Carson Raptor Williams received authorization to engage. Phantom Raptor, you're cleared hot. Light them up. Keisha's targeting system locked on. Then she saw them through the targeting pod's high-resolution camera. Not trucks, buses, not insurgents, families, children visible through the windows, women, old men, refugees, not combatants. Raptor negative. Abort. Abort. Those are civilians. Phantom, you have your orders. Engage target. Raptor, I'm telling you those are civilian buses. Phantom, engage, or I'll report insubordination. Keisha made her choice in half a second. She banked hard, positioned her aircraft between Raptor and the convoy, locked her weapons radar on him instead. Raptor, break off or I light you up. The radio exploded with voices. Wingmen confused, command center demanding clarification, Raptor screaming about mutiny. But Keisha held position, her finger on the weapons release, until Raptor finally banked away and the convoy escaped across the border. The investigation took 3 months. Keisha's actions were technically mutinous. She'd threatened a superior officer, refused a direct order, endangered a mission. But the after-action review confirmed what she'd seen. Those were civilian refugees. Raptor's strike would have killed 47 people, including 12 children. They gave her the Airman's Medal. They also gave her a choice: accept permanent grounding in a desk job or resign with honors. She chose resignation because, she told the review board, if following orders means murdering children, then I don't belong in this uniform. Her mother's voice, weak but alert, brought her back to the present. Baby girl, you're crying. Keisha wiped her eyes, hadn't realized the tears had come. I'm okay, Mama. No, you're not, but you will be. Gloria's hand, skeletal thin, reached out. Keisha took it. I saw the news, saw what you did on that plane. Mama, you should be resting. I'm proud of you, so proud. Gloria's eyes still sharp, despite the morphine, held her daughter's gaze. You saved all those people, just like you saved those families in Syria. I lost my career for Syria. You kept your soul. That matters more. A pause, labored breathing. Keisha, baby, listen to me. When I'm gone, Mama, don't. When I'm gone, you go back up there. You hear me? You get back in a cockpit. You fly. Because that's who you are. Not the hoodie. Not the quiet girl hiding in economy. You're Phantom. You're a pilot. And the world needs people like you in the sky. Keisha couldn't speak through the tears. Promise me, Gloria whispered. I promise, Mama. Gloria Morgan passed away 6 days after Keisha landed Flight 227, peacefully in her sleep with her daughter holding her hand. Keisha scattered her ashes from the observation deck at Boeing Field, watching aircraft take off and land, remembering every conversation about dreams and duty and the price of doing what's right. Grant Whitmore's public apology was brief and clearly written by lawyers. I regret my statements during a stressful situation. and acknowledge Ms. Morgan's expertise. The $1 million donation to the Alaska Air Guard was made through a shell company to minimize publicity. But Derek Walsh quietly withdrew from 3 other high-profile aviation cases, his reputation damaged by the viral videos of him threatening the woman who'd saved his client's life. Tyler and Ashley's social media presence collapsed. The footage of them mocking Keisha, contrasted with her landing the aircraft, became a case study in prejudice and presumption. Brands dropped sponsorships. Followers disappeared. The internet for once delivered justice. United Airlines offered Keisha a position full captain, $777, qualified starting salary, $350,000, training to begin immediately. She declined. But the offer sparked something else. Within 3 months, 4 major airlines changed their hiring practices. Diversity recruitment became genuine outreach to military pilots transitioning to civilian life. The second chance programs for pilots who'd left for family reasons expanded significantly. The FAA issued new guidance on emergency crew operations, formally recognizing that in extremis, qualified assistance from passengers was not just permissible, but encouraged. Captain Thomas Rivers, recovered from his cardiac event, personally testified before Congress about the need for those changes. Commander Vance visited Keisha 3 weeks after Gloria's funeral. The Air Force wants you back. Full reinstatement. You'd train the next generation of combat pilots. Teach them not just how to fly, but how to think, how to question bad orders, how to be the kind of pilot who saves lives instead of just following procedures. Keisha stood at her mother's kitchen window, looking at the sky. And if I say no, then you say no. But Phantom, you were the best we ever had. That doesn't go away just because you left. The video of Keisha's testimony at the FAA hearing went viral. Not the dramatic moments, the quiet dignity of her response to Grant's accusations. She became reluctantly an icon. Women in aviation programs across the country reported enrollment spikes. Young black girls wrote her letters. You showed me I can fly too. Patterson started a scholarship fund in her name. Mrs. Ross became its first major donor. Within 6 months, it had funded flight training for 12 aspiring pilots who couldn't otherwise afford it. Congress invited Keisha to testify about military to civilian pilot transitions. She spoke for 12 minutes about sacrifice, family duty, and the impossible choices people shouldn't have to make between career and caregiving. The Military Family Leave Act passed 4 months later. Service members could now take up to 12 months unpaid leave for family medical emergencies without losing rank or benefits. Major Carson Raptor Williams, the officer Keisha had confronted over Syria, sent her a private letter. It said only, "You were right. I was wrong. I'm sorry." She never responded. Some wounds didn't need reopening to acknowledge they'd healed. 6 months after Flight 227, Keisha stood in a hangar at Boeing Field. The aircraft beside her wasn't military, wasn't commercial. It was a restored P-51 Mustang Silver, and beautiful, belonging to a vintage aircraft preservation group that Patterson had introduced her to. "You ready?" Patterson asked, holding out a flight helmet. Keisha took it, felt its weight, remembered the last time she'd worn one. "I don't know if I am. Only one way to find out." She climbed into the cockpit. The instruments were analog, simple, honest. No fly-by-wire computers, no hydraulic systems, just metal and physics and the skill of the pilot. Her hands found the controls, muscle memory older than doubt. The engine coughed, caught, roared to life. The propeller spun into invisibility, and the whole airframe vibrated with potential energy waiting for direction. Patterson's voice through the radio. "Whenever you're ready, Phantom." She released the brakes. The Mustang rolled forward, gathering speed, the tail coming up the wings, finding air, and then that perfect moment, lift off. The ground fell away. The sky opened up. And Keisha Morgan, who'd been grounded by grief and duty and impossible choices, was flying again. Not for the Air Force, not for an airline, for herself. She climbed through 3,000 feet, 4,000, 5,000. Seattle spread below like a promise, the water reflecting clouds, the mountains standing eternal. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She'd meant to leave it on the ground, but muscle memory had brought it along. She checked it at 7,000 feet, the Mustang level, and steady. Unknown number. Text message. Captain Morgan, this is Colonel Sarah Chen, USAF personnel. We have a unique proposition. New squadron forming veterans who left service for family reasons now returning on flexible terms. Part-time instruction. Mentorship. No deployments unless you choose them. Interested below her, another text appeared. This one from an address she didn't recognize, but somehow knew was legitimate. Ms. Morgan, Netflix documentary team. We'd like to tell your story, not just Flight 227, all of it. The choice you made in Syria, the price you paid, the lives you saved. Interested in talking. A third message, this one from United Airlines again. Position still open, always will be. She put the phone away, banked the Mustang into a gentle turn, felt the G-forces press her into the seat, gentle compared to fighters, but real enough to remind her body what it was built for. The sky stretched infinite in all directions. For the first time in 3 years, Keisha Morgan smiled. Really smiled. Not because the choices had been easy, not because the losses hadn't hurt, not because she had all the answers, but because she was flying. And sometimes that was enough. Below Patterson's voice, how's it feel up there? Phantom Keisha keyed the radio, her response simple and true. Like coming home,